So hello friends, about 2 weeks ago I did a video where I explained every spell in Witch Hat Atelier in detail, and today I thought I will just rank all of them based on usefulness, aura and potential danger. 0 being the lowest score and 5 the highest score for each category. And then I will combine either the points for usefulness and aura or the points for aura and danger, depending on if it's an offensive spell or utility spell. And I give it a total rank on the list. Because usefulness and danger are of course a bit more important than aura, I will double the weight for the points. I have 6 tiers, S, A, B, C, D and E, with the highest being 13 to 15 points and the lowest just 0 to 1 point. Which I'm not even sure that we will get to this point, but I just added it. In this part I will only start to speak about the different spells from the anime only, and in the next part I will also talk about the spells that are only in the manga to complete the entire list. And also just a quick reminder, this ranking is just my personal opinion based on how cool I think a spell is and how versatile it is. So let's go. We will start with the Fireball seal, which just creates a floating ball of fire that can also support some objects that are flying above it. So Kifri uses it mainly for cooking food. I mean, it's a very primal spell that is pretty useful and versatile. So I would say a 4 for usefulness is okay. The visuals are pretty simple, it's not really epic, so I give it 1 for aura. And a 2 for danger just because it's still a flame that can burn. And with all of this we are at 9 points, so I will put them into this category B tier. Then we will continue with the Snugstone seal that radiates the warmth without creating any flames. So basically a magical hand warmer. I would give it a 3 for usefulness because it's practical during winter or camping trips to just get a good hand warmer. It gets only 1 aura because it's not really something flashy. And the danger is 0 because it's not designed to be dangerous. So overall a very kind magic, basically our equivalent to a pocket heater, which brings us to 7 points. So C tier, pretty average spell. Then Spiraling Flame. Spiraling Flame launches a twisting kind of fire tornado. It's visually pretty cool, so I would give it around 3 aura, but only 1.5 for usefulness. But well, it's meant to be an attack spell, and the danger is around 3 since it's still a flame tornado. So not very practical, but definitely stylish, amounting to 9 points, so B tier. Then we have the Rainbringer seal that creates a rainfall. I would give it a 3 for usefulness. I mean, it could be used to water crops or help during droughts or something like that, or to just put out large forest fires or something. But I would only give it a 1 for aura, since it's just rain. And 0 for danger because it's hard to imagine the spell hurting anyone. Which brings us to a solid 7 points. So a good C tier spell. Continuing with Water Shot seal. This is just basically a water beam that shoots into one direction that Coco used to annoy Argot accidentally. I would give it a 1 for usefulness. I don't see the use case very much. 1 for aura and also probably 1 for danger because it's a bit of water. So I would give it an overall rank of 3. So D tier. Now we are getting into one of my favorite spells. The blue-eyed white dragon. I mean the giant water dragon from Kifri, made entirely of water. 5 for aura easily. Because I mean it's a giant dragon, it's pretty cool. I would also give it at least a 4 maybe for usefulness, because it's pretty good for combat, moving huge amounts of water, protecting allies, also extinguishing fires. It's pretty versatile. And danger is probably around 4, because it hurts pretty much when you get caught in the spell, I think, and could potentially even destroy buildings. So overall 13 points, so definitely S tier. Then the water rose, that's just a decorative flower made of water, so not very useful. I give it a 1 for usefulness, but I would still give it a 3 for aura. I mean, Kifri was still flexing a bit, and a 0 for danger because it's dangerous. So overall a rank of 5, which brings us to C tier. Then we have the Rain Cleaver. Text is missing here on this picture. The Rain Cleaver was the enchanted sword that can part water and allows the wielder to cut through rivers and other water-related streams. And I would give it a 2.5 for usefulness, because it's a bit situational, but still pretty valuable in some type of rescue missions like we saw in the anime and manga. Then a 4.5 for aura, because I mean it's a magical sword and it's pretty epic. And a 2.5 for danger, since it's mainly to cut water, but can still be swung around like a sword. So we are getting to a overall score around 10.5. So a pretty high B tier. Then we are getting into the earth spells with the boulder stretch rope that transforms the stone into a flexible type of ribbon. I would give it a 2.5 for usefulness. So turning solid rock into something you can climb or bridge gaps can be pretty practical, but it gets only a 1 for aura from me. Doesn't look very particularly exciting. And a 2 for danger, because it probably has some weight to it and you can still hurt someone with this. So a overall score of 6 points, which is a C tier. Then we have the Serpent's Bed of Sand, which is the spell that creates a massive fluffy cloud made of sand that's soft enough to put a dragon to sleep. I would give it a 3 for usefulness, because having a portable bed or cushion that can support any weight is pretty handy. And a 2.5 for aura, because I mean it's a floating sand cloud you can just whip out everywhere and sleep on it. And a 0 for danger, because it doesn't really seem to be dangerous. Which brings us to an overall score of 8.5, which is a B tier. Then we have the Wallband Seal. The Wallband manipulates earth and stone, allowing the caster to make barriers or reshape the terrain. I would give it a 3 for usefulness, because it's nice to have something like defensive magic and magic where you can shape the earth and surroundings. And a 2 for aura, because stone walls erupting from the ground still looks a bit cool. And 1 for danger, because it's more for defense. Which brings us to an overall score of 8, which is a B tier. Then the Wallbreaker Seal that destroys solid materials by reducing them to dust. I give it a 2 for usefulness. I mean, it's not bad to make something like tunnels maybe or holes, but it's a bit niche. 2 for aura, just for blasting stone away, and a 1 for danger, since it's mainly targeting stone. Which brings us to an overall score of 6, which is a C tier again. Then we have the Flying Puppet of Diversion, which was used by Tetia, that can make objects fly. It's a fairly situational spell again, but can be pretty good to distract enemies or animals. So I would give it at least a 2 for usefulness. I will give it a 2.5 for aura, just because seeing objects fly around is interesting and funny. And a 0 for danger, since it's more annoying than threatening. Which brings us to a overall score of 6.5, which is again a C tier. Then we have the Grasping Wind spell that creates a powerful current of air that can pull different objects towards the caster. I would give it a 2.5 for usefulness, because it's basically like a magical vacuum cleaner or something where you can just pull objects to yourself, which was used by Coco in some scenarios. Then a 2.5 for aura, because it looks pretty cool. And a 1.5 for danger, because if it's a stronger version, it could potentially hurt a bit and send people flying. Which brings us to an overall score of 7.5, which is a B. Then we have the Pegasus Carriage spell, which allows an entire carriage to fly through the air while keeping it stable. I will give it a 4 for usefulness, because flying transportation is pretty practical, especially if you're carrying multiple people or cargo. But you also have to keep in mind, of course, that there are also window way spells, although I'm not sure if the window way spells can also be used by non-witches. I don't think so. It also gets a 4.5 for aura. I mean, it's a flying magical carriage with a Pegasus. And 1.5 for danger, because if the spell is not maintained properly, it could potentially be a bit dangerous to be in the sky. Which brings to an overall score of 11.5, which puts it into A tier. Then the Sky Soaring Seal that generates thrust, so it can make large objects fly when it's drawn big enough. Like in Coco's case with the boat and the Xam. I would give it a 2.5 for usefulness because it's a bit niche but could still be useful in some flying spells and scenarios. It gets a 2 for aura because launching a boat into the sky is interesting. And 3 for danger just because it's essentially improvised flying. One mistake and gravity will remind you where you are. Which brings us to an overall score of 7, which is a high C tier. Then the Sylph Shoe Seal that lets the wearer fly simply by touching the two shoes together. I would give it a 5 for usefulness because it's very convenient to just fly around everywhere. Then a 4 for aura. I mean, you can just fly through the sky and air and it looks pretty cool. But also a 4 for danger, just because it's a bit risky to fly at high speed sometimes, I think. So you don't want to crash into any birds or trees while you are just soaring through the sky. Which brings us to an overall score of 14, which is a pretty good S rank. Then we will continue with the River Fairy Seal. It creates a constant gust of wind that propels a boat forward without the need of any natural wind. So it's 3 for usefulness for me, because it's a pretty good transportation device, or transportation spell for moving people and cargo, especially for people who don't use magic. It only gets a 1.5 for aura since it's just a boat, and a 1 for danger because it should be pretty safe unless something goes wrong with the boat itself. Which brings us to an overall score of 7.5, which is rounded up a B tier. Barely a B tier. Then the light type spell, Spirit of Light Beacon, which is the glowing bird made of light that can fly into the sky from Argot, which was used to distract the people. I will give it a 2 for usefulness because it's not really useful for everyday activities, but having a magical signal that you can send, like a flare gun, and just having something that can distract enemies can still be valuable in some situations. It gets a 4 for aura just because it was pretty epic. Just seeing the glowing giant bird fly into the sky, and the manga panel was also very beautiful. And I would give it a 1 for danger, since it's pretty harmless unless someone follows it in some direction where they shouldn't. Which brings us to an overall score of 8, which is a B. Then we have the Float Glow Lamp and the Well-Anchored Float Glow Lamp here as 2 separate seals, but I will rank them just together. They just create a floating orb of light that can act as a magical lantern, either just flowing somewhere or being anchored to the wall. I would give it a 3.5 for usefulness because it's a good light source that doesn't need any fuel and is pretty practical. But it only gets a 1 for aura since it's just a floating lamp, and 0 for danger because it's just light. So that brings us to an overall rank of 7, which is a C tier for both. Although I think the wall-anchored float glow lamp is probably a bit less exciting, although it's basically the same. Then we have the light beam that projects a concentrated beam of light, like a magical spotlight. I give it a 2 for usefulness because it could be useful for signaling people something or lighting up distant areas, but otherwise I don't really know any use cases. Gets a 2.5 for aura because it's a giant laser beam or just light beam, and 1 for danger since it's just a shining light that could be a bit annoying if you shine it right into someone's eye, like a laser pointer. Which brings us to an overall score of 6.5, which is a middle C tier. Glowstone Path Seal makes their specially prepared stones light up whenever someone steps on them, which was Ulrugio's creation. I would give it a 3 for usefulness, because it's a clever way to illuminate the path. You don't really need to have anything with you. You can just walk over it and it just lights you the way. It also gets a 3 for aura, since it's cool to have glowing footsteps. It's very charming, especially during something like festivals. And 0 for danger because it's safe, which brings us to an overall score of 9 points. That is a middle B tier. Then we have the Carousel of Light, which was only seen in the anime. That creates a small glowing light carousel that spins around in the air. I will give it only 1 usefulness because it's mainly just for show and more decorative. Maybe 2 for aura because the swirling lights are pretty to look at but fairly simple, and 0 danger because it's not really dangerous. So a high D tier overall. Then we have some of the crystal skills with the crystal ribbon that creates a long flexible ribbon made of crystal that can be bent and shaped similar to the boulder stretch rope, and it's the favorite spell of Riche. I would give it a 3 for usefulness because it's surprisingly versatile. You can tie things with it, you can decorate, you can climb with it, or even guide creatures. I would give it a 3 for aura because it looks like a shimmering ribbon made of crystal. That is pretty cool. And 1 for danger since it doesn't seem really dangerous unless someone does anything to you with the ribbon, which brings us overall to a 9, which is a middle B tier. Then we have the crystal shards here that cause a large crystal spike to just burst out of the spell. I would give it a 1 for usefulness because I don't really see the situation where this can be used. It gets still a 2 for aura because the crystal themselves looks pretty cool, but nothing in comparison to other spells, of course. And a 2 for danger because it's a sharp crystal spike that can still be dangerous if you throw it around, I don't know. Which brings us to an overall score of 4, which is a high D tier. Then we have the Icy Road that creates a smooth, icy, crystalline path that allows the user to quickly slide across the ground, which was seen in the anime in the Serpent Back Cave. I would give it a 2.5 for usefulness because it's a fun mobility spell that can be pretty useful to escape something or make ground. It earns a 2.5 for aura from me because it's pretty stylish to just move over the icy road, to just slide over it. And 2.5 for danger because if you potentially lose control at high speed, you are probably going to have a very bad day. Which brings us to a 7.5 overall, which is a B tier. I will just round up always at 0.5. Then we have the Capture Pennant spell that is used by the Knights Morales that allows the pennant to wrap itself around people or objects and also reinforces the fabric so it won't tear easily. So I would give it a 3.5 for usefulness because it's pretty reliable and a good restraint spell where you can also rescue injured people like we saw or catch criminals, and a 3.5 for aura because it's a pretty cool big banner that moves on its own, and a 3 for danger since being magical restraint can obviously become dangerous if used incorrectly, but it's not directly dangerous. Which brings us to an overall score of 10.5, which is actually an A tier. Then we have the Repetition seal that is used in many other seals, so it's a pretty important part that restores objects to the original condition, like making rotten food fresh again, cleaning clothes, or returning damaged objects to a state that is like new. I would give it a 4.5 for usefulness because it's a pretty best everyday life spell you can use in the entire series. I mean, I already named the use cases, so yes, it's pretty obvious. I will only give it a 2 for aura because on its own it's not really something special. It shines in combination with other spells, and a 1 for danger since it could occasionally undo things you actually wanted to keep, which brings us to an overall score of 11. That is a A tier. Then you have the Gathering Shadows, or also Borrow Shade Cloak. Surrounds a cloak with shadows, allowing the wearer to hide within it and become much harder to notice. I will give it a 3.5 for usefulness because stealth is pretty useful in some situation for exploring, escaping danger, and not being seen, and a 3 for aura because just disappearing into the shadows looks cool and just become invisible. Then 2 for danger since a spell that makes people nearly invisible could be abused in the wrong hands. So overall a 10.5, which is also a A. Then we have the Mirror Cloak spell and the Mirror spell, with the Mirror spell being also a part of the Mirror Cloak spell. The Mirror Cloak spell allows someone to blend in by reflecting the appearance of nearby creatures, like we saw with the Merfins, making it much easier to approach animals unnoticed. So I would give it a 2 for usefulness because it's pretty effective in its intended purpose. But other than that, it's, I think, a bit more niche. And it also earns a 2 for aura because of the camouflage effect, which is pretty clever, I think. And 0 for danger because it's just not a offensive spell. That brings us to a overall score of 6, which is a C tier. And then the Mirror spell, which just creates a magical reflection. So I would just give it a 2 for usefulness because on its own it doesn't really do much. It's just a essential component for other illusion magic. And it gets a 2 for aura since it's a magical reflection, which can be handy if you want to look in a mirror. And a 0 for danger, which brings us to an overall score of 6, which is also a C tier. Then we have the floating drops that create tiny floating water droplets that were used by Kifri to cool Coco's fever. So I would give it a 2 for usefulness because it's pretty specific, just to cool something. And maybe a 3.5 for aura, just because somehow Kifri is able to just make everything look cool. And 0 for danger because it's not dangerous, which brings us to an overall score of 7.5, which is a B tier. And we have the Rain Flinger that just dries up everything in its range by creating warm, dry air. So pretty handy in everyday life. It's a solid everyday utility spell, so I gave it a 3 in usefulness. And the visuals aren't especially exciting, so I just gave it 1 aura. And a 1 for danger just because could be a bit uncomfortable if the heat is too excessive in the spell, which brings us to an overall score of 7, which is a high C tier. Then we have the Water Flinger that is just here as Rain Flinger drying. The spell was used by Ulrugio to dry up the brush buddies and Coco. He had it in a ring format, but judging from the construction, it probably evaporates or removes water in some way also. So I gave it a 2 for usefulness because we don't know its full potential yet. And also just a 1 in aura because it's similar to Rain Flinger probably, and also 1 in danger. So I basically just gave the same value to Water Flinger also, which brings this to the score of 5, which is also a C tier. Then we have the Vapor Bubble spell that is a spell that pulls moisture straight out of the air and condenses it into clean water, which is also a very practical spell. So I would give it a 4 in usefulness, just so you can create drinking water whenever you want. And the shimmering water bubble also looks pretty elegant, and the whole setup of it also just looks pretty cool. So I gave it a 2 aura and a 0 danger, which brings us to a 10 for the Vapor Bubble. So a high B tier. Then we have the Frozen Road or Frozen Path that is similar to Icy Road essentially. So you can just cross difficult terrain much easier, which creates also a Icy Road. I would give it a 2.5 usefulness because it also has clear practical uses, and it's also just Icy Road, just a bit different. The Icy Trail looks also pretty cool, so it gets a 2.5 aura and also a 2.5 danger because it's like the Icy Road, pretty slippery, so if you are going fast on it, it could be a pretty dangerous spell. So overall a 7.5, which is a C tier. Then we have the Billow Cluster spell that converts material into a floating cloud, which was used for the Serpent Bed of Sand spell and also used in some other spells. It's pretty versatile, so I gave it 3 usefulness, and the visual effect is interesting but not spectacular, so it just barely gets 2 aura and also 1 danger just for the possibility of filling the area with debris or something that obscures visibility. So overall 8 points, which is a B tier. Then we have the Memory Erasure spell. That is one of the more morally complicated spells in the series and used by Knight Morales to erase memories, events, or persons, or knowledge of magic, or basically anything. From a practical standpoint, it's pretty useful, at least for the knights, and also in some other scenarios in the story that I will not mention. So I gave it a 3 for usefulness, and the spell itself isn't particularly flashy, earning 2 aura, but the ethical implications are terrifying, which is why it gets a big 4.5 danger, which brings us to a overall score of 11, which is an A tier. Then we have the sand bridge that lets you build a bridge out of loose sand, one pillar at a time, which was seen by Urugio after the bridge collapsed at the sandbank to make a temporary crossing. This is exactly the kind of spell I like. So I would say it gets a 4 for usefulness because it's rebuilding infrastructure out of sand, which could be pretty good after some kind of disasters or stuff like that. Also a 3 for aura because it's a pretty cool bridge and looks pretty majestic. And danger is only 1, I think, because it could be potentially dangerous if the bridge isn't completely well constructed, because you have to make every pillar separate, which brings us to 11 points. That is a 8 tier. Then we have probably one of the most useful spells, the Window Way spell, where you can just connect 2 distant places through magical portals and just go through it. So there is basically no faster travel than this, just basically fast travel. So yeah, as expected, 5 for usefulness, 3 for aura because the portal looks pretty cool. Also Kivi's portal in his atelier where you can just spin it around and change the locations. And the danger is only 1 because if you make a mistake in a teleportation, it could potentially be a problem if you can't go back. So it gets a overall score of 13, which also is a S tier. Then the enchanted doorknobs here. This magical doorknob opens hidden entrances and can even lead to different rooms depending on which knob you use. I give it 2 usefulness because it's mostly tied to specific buildings. And I will give it 2 aura just because it's cool to just have a doorknob and just open everywhere the gateway to Narnia, and the danger is basically 0, which is a total of 6 points. That is a middle C tier. Then the handheld window way, that is basically a portable version of the larger portal and is also pretty useful for communication, passing small objects through it. So it also gets a 4.5 usefulness because it's very convenient, and it also gets a 2 aura because of the creativeness and the potential, and a 1 for danger, which brings us to a overall score of 11, which is also a A tier. Now we're getting into the forbidden spells, which are mostly dangerous and not really useful. So I will rank most of them based on aura and danger. We have first the illusory labyrinth that just twists space into an endless maze where no matter how far you walk, you will just end up back where you started, which can be pretty devastating if you don't find the seal to erase it. And yeah, it's basically useless, so I would give it maybe a 1 for usefulness. The concept is a bit eerie, so it definitely gets 3 aura, and the danger is at least a 4 because you can, as mentioned before, just be trapped there forever, which is a total of 11 points, which brings this spell to A. Then we have the petrification spell. It's also a very terrifying spell we see instantly in the first episode that transforms just everything into stone-like material, freezing not only the bodies but seemingly the time itself. So I again just gave it a 1 for usefulness, a 3 for aura just because it's very imposing and intimidating, and a danger of a 5. Because it basically can just erase entire lives in an instant. And this spell is also pretty fast in its expansion. Overall, a total of 13 points, which brings it to the S tier. Then we have the Scale Wolf Curse. The Scale Wolf Curse permanently transforms the victim into a hybrid creature. In the case of Oini, it was the magical cloak he was merged with, so he became a Scale Wolf. So like most forbidden magic, again, maybe 1 usefulness at most. And the transformation itself in the anime and the manga was just terrifying. So definitely at least 4 aura. And the irreversible nature of the curse, unless you use forbidden magic, makes it a 4 in danger. So in total 12 points, which brings it to a high A tier. Then the twin bottle spell, which links 2 containers together, allowing the liquids to instantly travel between them. So both have equivalent volume of liquid. Unlike the other forbidden spells that are mostly just to harm, this spell is actually useful with a 3 from me, because before the Day of the Pact it was used for sharing medicine over long distances between healers. It also earns a 2.5 aura because it's looks pretty cool with the coin inside. And the danger is only a 1 because the real problem isn't the spell itself, it's how it's used, which can be said about a lot of spells, which is a total of 9.5 points, which is 10 points and a high B tier. Then we have the Ancient Labyrinth spell that was put on the Serpentback Cave that distorts the sense of direction, which makes it incredibly dangerous to wander away from the main path. So it's basically just an ancient trap, so not really useful. The ruins in the cave is pretty mysterious with the distorted space and path in the middle, so it gets a free aura from me, while the danger is a solid 3, since getting hopelessly lost or just getting off the designated path could be pretty fatal, which brings it to a B tier with overall 9 points. Then we have just the unknown spells left, basically, with the Forbidden Flame and the Forbidden Glow, with the Forbidden Flame just being a Fireball spell, basically. So I just gave it a usefulness of 3, which is a bit less than a Fireball, just because it's not really much is known about the spell, and a aura of 1 and danger of 2 because it's fire, which brings it to a 7 that is a C tier. Forbidden Glow also just looks like a Sparkles of Light despite the ominous name, which is just a 1 usefulness, I think, 1 aura and 0 danger. So all in all, it's pretty harmless and nothing really special, so it gets a D tier with 3 points. Last but not least, the Cook Pot seal, which is also a combination of repetition seals, basically. So I would just put this also in B tier, a bit lower than the repetition seals, just because it's a derivative of it. And that's every spell from the Witch Hat Atelier anime so far. I will do another part in the future where I'm yapping over all the spells that are only in the manga to finish ranking all spells that are currently available, and from tiny utility spells that make everyday life easier to crazy forbidden magic that can permanently change someone's fate. There is something for everyone. So which spell would you want to learn the most? Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.